I told you, stay away from that weightlifting. It's dangerous. You're going to get hurt. Now go jump on the trampoline. Okay? So that was my first experience. When I graduated from high school, they had doubled the size of that weightlifting. Right? So they had 2 rusty bars, no college. I get on this campus as a freshman baseball player, staying in Hart Hall. They said, we're going to put you in racquetball. But they hadn't finished resurfacing the racquetball courts, so they put my roommate and I in badminton. Never seen badminton in my life, right? But I'm in badminton. And the last thing the coach said is, whatever you do, don't go to that weight room. All right? We don't want any of our baseball players in that weight room. That was the first 18, 19 years of my life, right? That was my experience with weightlifting. That was my experience with strength training. It's come a long way since then. But I want to talk to you about other things that they didn't teach me in college, including how to resistance train. When I was in college, there was no exercise science. There were no instructional videos. There were no cell phones. And Al Gore hadn't invented the internet. Right? We had no website. We had no YouTube. We had no text messages. We had no digital cameras. We had no strength programs. I mean, I graduated from high school in '61. I graduated from college in '65. Got my doctorate in '69. I'd graduated. And Boyd Epley hadn't started the program at Nebraska yet. There was also no NSCA until almost 13 years after I graduated. Now, this is a picture of Bill Verdon. Bill's a Marine, former Marine. I don't think there are former Marines, but he's a Marine. Anyway, he was my very first manager with Houston Astros. And he said, son, I'm going to give you one word. If you can take this word and apply it, you might have a long career. If you can't, you might not make the day. And that word is adjust. He said, you may have the best workout plans for today. And we go into extra innings and the guys are too tired to work out. Or maybe we have a 2-hour rain delay, which is very common. Or maybe we have a team meeting and I chew everybody out and they're so pissed off they don't want to work out. Or maybe we have a quick bus because we need to get to the airport. Or maybe the guy that you're going to work out with today has an injury or has a bad day or just has a bad attitude. You have to be able to adjust. This is the visiting weight room, Wrigley Field, Chicago. Now, to the left of that stability ball are the trainers and the strength coaches' lockers. And this is a very tiny room. And there's no 2 dumbbells there that are the same size. So when you go to Wrigley Field, you have to be able to adjust. Not only to the weight room, because you can go to the visiting weight room, which is probably 3 times the size of this area, the home weight room, which is about 3 times the size of the area I'm standing on. But you have to walk across home plate to get there. So you're going to go after the game, and now you got to walk through the crowd. Or you might get up as we did here, 3rd game of the season. And this is what you're presented with. Now you've got 1 exercise bike, and you've got 12 pitchers. And this is what it looks like outside. So you have to be able to adjust. 3 days after this, we're in Philadelphia. I'm out working with one of our pitchers. We both have earphones on. And I could hear my Achilles snap over the earphones. And he heard it snap over the earphones. So how do you adjust? Well, I spent 2 weeks in a wheelchair. I spent about 12 weeks in a walking boot, and then I was a September call-up. So, you have to be able to adjust because things are going to happen and situations are going to change. This is something that wasn't in existence when I started in Major League Baseball. Certainly wasn't in existence when I was in college. And that's social media. Social media can wreck your ship. There's a study out of Harvard. So these are not from Pippa-Passes, Kentucky, right? These are supposedly our brightest people. And what they did was they took their students and they gave them a mental task. And then after 30 minutes, they sent them either text messages or they sent them emails. And then they asked them to respond. And then they measured how long did it take them to get back to their original train of thought, and it took 15 minutes. And the more messages they sent, the longer it took. So if you have a weight room and you're letting guys in there with their cell phones, or girls in there with their cell phones, and they're checking their text messages and so forth, you might as well kiss your workout goodbye. Because every time that they change their focus, they lose their focus. So the takeaway is your brain can't do two things at one time. It's got to give up one to effectively accomplish the other. So what this says is multitasking makes you slower and it makes you dumber. So if you're here to learn and you've paid your money, put your cell phone on mute. Don't check your text messages. Now, how does this relate to baseball? Well, in 2011, we're paying this big guy on the right, Carlos Lee, $20 million a year. We gave him a 5-year, $100 million contract to drive in runs and to hit fourth in the lineup. And I keep a book, and in that notebook, we record the times from base to base, from home to first, and so forth, about 5,000 times a year. And in addition to that, I put down what the individual does. And I don't know why it took me almost 92 games, but I finally looked at it to see how Carlos was doing his first at-bat. In Carlos's first at-bat, the first 92 games, he was hitting a .77. All right? He was 14 for 79. His first at-bat. And usually, his first at-bat, we had at least one person on base. And we're getting this guy $20 million to hit under 200. Now, Carlos is a two-cell phone guy. He was texting right up to game time. I can't tell you the number of times we had players tell the manager, hey, the starting pitcher's going out on the mound. Somebody send Carlos a text and get him on the field. Right? Now, Carlos had two phones. He's a businessman. He had one phone that went back to Panama for his ranching business, for his trucking business, for his helicopter rental business. And then he had one that went to his ranch in Houston. So anyway, we looked at this information, and then I had our stat people call up the 3-4 hitters in all of Major League Baseball. And look where Carlos was. Dead last. He was dead last on his own team, which was a bad team. He was dead last in Major League Baseball. So then I looked at what was his 10-year career average. And his 10-year career average was 281. But he was hitting $1.77. So I presented him with this information. He said, well, what are we going to do? And so we had a plan that he would turn off his cell phone 30 minutes before game time. And then he would come into the weight room if at home. If we're on the road, we did it in batting cages. We did it in tunnels, in Wrigley Field. Sometimes we had to do it in the dugout because there was no facility. But he would do, 8 to 10 incline push-ups. At home, we had TRX. He'd do a TRX row, or maybe tubing rows. And then he liked med balls, so we'd do squats and forward throws and lateral throws, crossover throws. He really liked to do the basketball shuttle, where you go back and forth and you have to run with him and pass the ball back and forth. We do some slams, 3 or 4 ladder drills, and then we did this one-leg dip. And we were very fortunate. The first time we did this, we happened to be in Coors Field, and we happened to be in front of a mirror. And the first time that he went down, his right knee collapsed. He had valgus stress. And he said, oh my God, I can't have this, Because what's happening now is my hips are turning up, my shoulders are turning up, and I'm going to pop the ball up. And he did. 23 times. His first at bat, he had popped the ball up. And then before the game, the last 5 to 10 minutes, he'd come out and play catch and run sprints instead of checking his text messages. Well, the last 70 games, he went 25 for 55. He had over 450. He had only 6 infield pop-ups instead of 23. So he was averaging 30% infield pop-ups for a guy making $20 million a year. 2012, he started the season 35 for 80, hit over 400. We traded him to the Marlins. He was gone about 3 days, and he called me up and he said, hey, I'm still doing it. So I talked to him the other day. He sent me a picture of his 8-year-old son at 120 pounds. And he said, I'm not doing it anymore. Of course, he's raising cattle. So the takeaway is you can't turn it on at game time. And the same thing is, you can't turn it on in the weight room. Major league players and minor league players, if you put SportsCenter on, they're going to watch it all day long. And they're going to do a set, and then they're going to go watch SportsCenter for 5 minutes. and then they're going to go do another set. So it totally disrupts your program. So you need to be in control of your social media and so forth. The third thing that they never told me was that speed is one of the 5 tools that nobody works on. Now, I got interested in timing speed by accident. We're having spring training for football, and we've all done this. You know, the first sprint is half speed, and then 6/10, and then 7/10. Well, we got up to about 80%. And at 80%, I was way out front, which I shouldn't have been. And some big guy picked me up by the jersey and said, "You idiot, the only difference between half speed and full speed is you run at the same velocity, but you make an uglier face." So I got interested in this. And then we started looking around in baseball, and why are players running? Are baseball players running for conditioning? You know, most events or most activities are 5 seconds. Are they improving their mechanics? Well, I can tell you right now, the mechanics are sorry. Acceleration is the key, but are they really running hard enough to accelerate? And do they ever achieve top speed? Well, my suggestion to you is get a watch and use it. Ever since my first day, we time every run to first base. We go home to first, home to second. Hell, we even time the national anthem. And, you know, over and under is 40 seconds, right, for the national anthem. But one of the things that will happen is if you start timing your players, you'll increase the intensity of their effort. You make them accountable for whether they ran hard or whether they didn't. And you create a climate of speed awareness. I can't tell you the number of times that I had guys come up to me and say, "Hey, what did I get on that last time to first base? You know, I got a bad start." I even had one guy say, "Hey, don't send my times to the video game people because I was playing, you know, a game with my 5-year-old son. I hit a single to right field and got thrown out at first. It was embarrassing." You know, I'd say, we don't send your times in the video game. And also, in September, when the September call-ups come up and the young kids come up, they'll say, "Hey, get a time on this guy for me." Because we saw him in the minor league. When I was in college, we were told you were either born fast or you're not. We now know that genetics sets your upper limit, but training determines how close you come to that upper limit. We now know that you can't make anyone faster, but you can make everyone faster. Right? So you can't make anyone fast, but you can make everyone a step or so faster. But regardless of how much work you put in, you're going to run only as fast as your mechanics permit. So the same thing happens. It doesn't make a difference whether you're shooting baskets, whether you're hitting a baseball, whether you're running. When your mechanics break down, you cease to improve. So the number one thing that you have to do is you have to work on your mechanics. Somebody asked me yesterday, you know, what was the key to Nolan Ryan's success? And Nolan explains it this way. Number one is genetics. And number two was mechanics. Because he and I sat down and he had thrown, by the time he got to Houston, he had thrown 100,000 pitches 90 miles an hour or faster. And in 9 years at Houston, he never threw a fastball under 90 miles an hour. He said, you can't run a mile with a rock in your shoe. You can't throw that hard, that long, that consistently without good mechanics. So you've got to work on mechanics. And then Nolan said the third thing was preparation. You know, how you prepare. You should never get beat because the other guy's better prepared than you are. So for us, the keys to improving acceleration, because that's all that baseball is mechanics. We improve mechanics, then we improve single leg strength, and then we use the SAID principle, we run fast. Now I'm going to show you a slide in a minute that says if you spend 80% of your time jogging, you just spend 80% of your time practicing to be slow. All right? And you watch baseball, they don't run hard very often. Who has a stopwatch? Anybody? You got one? Okay. This is what I want you to do. I want you to start it and stop it as fast as you can. Ready? Go. What'd you get? Oh. 1.5. All right, most people will get around 0.2 of a second. 0.2 of a second. All right, he got 1.5. The amount of time that he took right there. That's the difference between running a 4.7 and a 4.5 if you're a football player. That much. That's the difference between running a 4.55, all right, and a 4.35 if you're a baseball player. That's all that it takes, and it happens that quickly. Now, all fast athletes don't have perfect mechanics. The Giants were in town the other day playing the Rockies, so I went over to see Hunter Pence, who came up with the Astros organization. Have you ever seen Hunter run? Seen him throw? Seen him swing? You wouldn't teach anybody to do any of the things that Hunter does. He says, hey, I throw like I have no elbow. But he's one of the best players in baseball and one of the best people in baseball. Well, Hunter is so powerful, he can overcome his bad mechanics. But remember, we said what happens? Mechanics sets your upper limit. What happens if Hunter loses his power? What happens if Hunter slows down because of an injury? Now we've got an individual with less than above average power and bad mechanics. So we need to make sure that we work on our mechanics. We have been using Vern Gambatti's PAL program for a long time in terms of concept. You know, it's posture, arms, and legs. So we check for body lean. We check to make sure they're running cheek to cheek, that their elbows are slightly fixed, that they have a positive shin angle, that they dorsiflex at the ankle, and that they approximate triple extension, which you're never going to get. What we're looking for is every step is push, 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 and every step gets longer. And you can see in this dartfish example here, every step for this individual gets longer. And we teach three steps with either foot, eyes down. Head straight, eyes down, and then 3 more steps to come up. It takes approximately a good runner 6 steps to run 10 yards. So in 6 steps, you should be at a 45-degree angle. Your eyes should be up. We do this on all the Ranger players during spring training and throughout the season. Now, here are 2 guys. Carlos Lee on the left, 4'5". Craig Gentry on the right, 3'9", 5". If you look at them, they both have positive lean. They both have a positive shin angle. They both are ankle dorsiflex. They're both moving from the shoulders. Both of them have elbows flexed. Carlos has 30% more inertia because he weighs 270 pounds. But if you look at his relative strength, his single leg strength, it's about 0.4 of a pound of strength or force per pound of body weight, whereas you look at Gentry, it's a little bit over a pound. Now, we're never going to take Carlos from a 4.5 to a 4 flat. But we said what? You can make everyone what? Faster. And Carlos has good running mechanics, but acceleration is force divided by mass, so he's got a lot of mass, right? So we got to kick his force potential up, and we do that by improving single leg relative strength. Now, you're in this room because you've all heard that squats are king, but you saw that weight room in Chicago. You think we could squat in Chicago? There are a lot of places that don't have squat racks. In Major League Baseball, it's 162 games in 180 days, and it's 81 days on the road. Right? So we wanted consistency at home and on the road. I mean, the one thing that's preached in baseball is consistency. Your release point has to be consistent. Your swing has to be consistent. Everything has to be consistent. So why would you change your workouts at home and the road? So the other thing we found is that the weak link is your back. How much you squat is not a function of your hips and legs. It's how strong your back is to support that weight. And in Major League Baseball, the typical player is going to make 20,000 swings and 20,000 throws in the course of the season. That's over 40,000 rotations. And now to put more stress on it. So we went to split squats with the rear foot elevator. It gave us single leg strength that we needed for speed and power. It gave us better results with half the weight. We had less risk. By putting the weights out in front, we changed our line of gravity and we had more posterior chain work. Now, Roger Clemens always said, hey, the key to success is your hips. Regardless of whether you're pitching in baseball or dancing in a pole, all right, the key to success is your hips. Well, what we found is that if you're timing 30 yards, the first 10 yards makes up 80% of your 30-yard sprint time. If you're running 10 yards, the first 3 steps make up 90%. And we found that most injuries occur when you accelerate, when you decelerate, and when you change direction. So if all you're doing is going out here jogging, and you're not accelerating, decelerating, and changing direction, you're going to increase your potential for injury. So we used a variety of starts. In baseball, it's really hard to run the bases during batting practice. So you have to do it out in the outfield. So we would simulate straight steals. We would take secondary leads. We would do get backs, right? You got picked off first, there's an overthrow, now you got to go back the other direction. We simulate rundowns. We even simulated slides, get ups and runs. You've all done this drill where you have to get in a prone position and then get up and sprint. So the first day I did that, I was so proud of myself. And Craig Beecho, who's going into the Hall of Fame this year, said, you know, that's a football drill. I'm not going to do that. So what happens when your best player says, I'm not going to do your drill? So the next day I brought out a base. I laid it down. I said, okay, you just slid in head first. Get up and run. He said, this is the best drill I ever saw. This is really good. And then Jeff Bagwell said, you know what? I slide feet first. Can I get down feet first and get up and run? I said, yeah. And Steve Finley said, well, you know, we never get up and run straight ahead. We get up and run to the left. Can we get up and run to the left? I said, yeah. All right. So, genius. We also go out in the outfield and we run the curves. So we simulate running the bases. We simulate going first to third. We simulate rounding second and having to hold up. We simulate jogging into second, and then there's an error, and then you have to accelerate and go to third. So we simulate as much as we possibly can that's going to happen in the game. Now, I was very fortunate. When I was a kid, my idol was Yogi Berra. I had a picture of him on the wall. And then I had him as a bench coach for 9 years. But Yogi said you can see a lot by watching. So we watched our players. We watched their setup when they run. Do they have a parallel stance or do they have a staggered stance? And I can tell you right now that if an individual sets up in a parallel stance, his first step is going to be to the right of the line. And I can tell you for sure it takes 3 steps to get back on line. So once you cross over that line, it's going to take you 3 steps to get back on line. And so if you don't use a staggered stance, your players are going to be slow. And so we had hand signals, hey, staggered, parallel. We looked at where that first foot lands. We used whether to use a spin step or whether to use a drop step. And I'm going to tell you which one's better in a minute. But a lot of these guys, especially guys coming out of high school and college, they got this. And their first movement is here. And they create so much torque in their upper body that they over-rotate and their shoulders open before their hips. So now here my shoulders are going this way, and where are my hips? So you need to look for that. And then we look for takeoff angle. Are they high or low? And we time our guys in 10 yards. You start running much more than 10 yards, and you increase your risk of injury. We used to time our players. We'd do splits. We'd get them at 30, and we'd get them at 60 yards. And then the salaries got so high. Right? And we found that at 10 yards, we don't get any injuries. And we found that what? 10 yards, about 90% of what you're going to need. And so if you've got a player that's making $10 million, and every day that he doesn't play, it's costing the team $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, you lose your job in a hurry. So we timed our players. We're looking for 1.6 for real fast guys and 2 fast for our mules. And when the speed starts slowing down, you stop. Right? Because now you're working on something other than speed. You've all gotten your power lift and your perform better catalogs, and they've got all this crap in it. All right? And we used it. All right? But your tools are only as good as the mechanical efficiency of your user. Now, down at the bottom, I've become friends with Lauren Landau in Denver at the Sedman Hawkins Performance Clinic. And if any of you get a chance to go see Lauren somewhere, do it. He's outstanding. But Lauren says adding resistance to bad mechanics will not solve your efficiency problem. It usually makes them worse. So I came up with this. If you give a better hammer to a bad carpenter, he doesn't become a better carpenter. Right? So if you don't change the mechanical efficiency of the participant, you can buy all the sleds and tubing and parachutes you want, and you haven't helped much. We used to have T-shirts when Art Howell was manager that said, practice makes permanent. If you do it right, it's permanently good. If you do it bad, it's permanently wrong. But what we've got over here, this is a picture of Lauren, and you see that he's got good angles. He's got good force vectors, and he's got a positive carryover to sprinting. And then on the other side, we've got a picture of Ian Kinsler in spring training. Look at him. He's hunched over. Right? He's got poor angles. He's got bad vectors. He's got less carryover to sprinting. He did a lot of work, but he didn't get much carryover. Practice makes permanent, right? My friend Jose Cruz was on the very first Astro team, and then he was a coach for as long as he and I were together in Houston. And he used to say, it's not the arrow, it's the Indian. So a guy like Lance Berkman here makes an out, and what does he do? He looks at his bat. The infielder makes an error, and he does what? Can't believe my glove let me down. Right? So when we get back to those tools, the tools are the arrow. The participant is the Indian. You've got to change the Indian. First 15 yards are critical if you're running to first base. It's impossible to recover from a slow start. The average baseball player runs to first base at 85% of maximum. And he runs all out, or at least 90%, every 3 or 4 plate appearances. So if a guy pops up a lot like Carlos Lee did, or he walks, or he strikes out, he doesn't run hard, maybe for 3 or 4 days. Average baseball player, right-handed, major league level, 4.35, left-handed, about 0.3 of a second faster. So we started measuring, what are we doing at the halfway mark? And so we've got here, this is Ichiro, he's 4.32, 2.57 out of the box to the first 15 yards, plus 1.75 the second half. Everybody is going to be the same that second half. Now, Ichiro might be 1.75, Michael Bourne might be 1.65, Carlos Lee might be 1.8. But he's always going to be that same value. You're never going to be able to accelerate more the second half. If we looked at Michael Bourne's numbers when he was with Houston, 95% of his bang-bang plays were in 4 seconds or less. Right? And we look at him, and it's 2.54 plus 1.46 in the second half. Now, if he does as most major league players, hits a ground ball, puts his head down, breaks out slow, runs at 85%, he's going to be 2.92 the first half. And then if the infielder drops the ball, he's going to do what? He's going to run like hell, right, to be safe. And what's his acceleration going to be? 1.46. You can't accelerate enough over the last 15 yards. So what we tell our players is, hey, if you run hard and he boots the ball, you give yourself a chance to be safe. If you run slow the first half and he boosts the ball, you're almost always out. So run hard the first half, you can always slow down. But you're going to run hard halfway in either situation. So why not run hard the first half and give yourself a chance to be successful? All right. Now, head first slides. Oh, these are very important. All right. But now we have a rash of people sliding headfirst into first base. When Darrell Rowe was a football coach at Texas, he said 3 things can happen when you pass the ball, and 2 of them are bad. Well, 3 things can happen when you slide headfirst into first base, and 2 of them are bad, and sometimes 2 of them can happen at once. Michael Bourne went over to the Indians. He was hitting .333 in the month of April. I told you, when he runs hard to first base, it's 4 flat. When he slides, it's 4.08. So he's slower when he slides, 2% slower. He slid this particular day. The guy stepped on his hand. He got 15 stitches in his hand. He's out for 21 days. He cost his team $43,000 a day. That's what they had to pay him to sit on the bench and recover. Plus, they had to pay his replacement, prorated at a major league minimum of $500,000 a year. So it gets rather expensive for your team, not to mention the fact that they lose your productivity. We also have people, and you see this, people run and jump to first base. All right, they get there and their last step, and they got to really jump out. Well, here's what we found. When you jump, there's a 38% increase in distance. There's a 67% increase in time because you're airborne. You're not applying forces into the ground. So your velocity decreases by 4%. And if you look at this, if you look at velocity, here's his velocity on the first step. 8 feet per second, 14, 19, right? We're a little engine that can, right? We're trying. We're moving, improving. 20, and then he jumps, and it goes to what? It goes down. So when you jump to first base, what happens? You're slower. When you slide into first base, you're what? You're slower. Now, I promised you I would tell you this. The fastest way to second base is a drop step. Right? It's a natural movement. Everybody does it. It's the optimal angle for force production. People used to say, hey, you're slower at the start, but you're faster at the end. Well, our data says it's 0.633 seconds if you drop step, 0.790 seconds. That's for the time if you use a crossover step. That's left foot to left foot hitting the ground. So you're actually faster. This is another picture of Lauren. Lauren said, hey, but what we're doing is we're sacrificing inches for angles. We're going to give up some inches at the beginning because we got a drop step. We're going backwards. But what do we find? Your line of gravity moves forward about 8 to 10 inches. So you're closer to second base. You aren't slower. You don't sacrifice inches for angles. You're closer to the base, and you have better angles from which to apply force. Now, Vern Gambetta said this, a team can't win if its best players are sidelined with an injury. So I presented this for you. It's major league pitchers. We also have it on position players. But it's the type of injury and the percentage of days. So you can see here, 49% back, 80% shoulder, 86% elbow. We can carry this out to hamstrings and knees. So where are your injuries going to be if you're a baseball player? Shoulders and what? Elbows. So you can't prevent the injuries if you don't know where they're going to be. So we need to have some idea of injury history. Now, hamstring injuries. Number one cause of hamstring injury is a previous hamstring injury. So if you're going to hear a lot today about, predicting injuries and so forth. But the number one cause of injury in almost any injury is a previous injury of the same site. Major League Baseball, last year, 85 hamstring injuries, almost 1,700 days on the disabled list, average player out 21 days, total cost almost $30 million. That's lost salary plus paying your replacement. Most occurred while running the bases. What did I say? We don't what? We don't run hard, right? So we better be doing what? Simulating them, right? Keys are prevention and what? Complete rehab, because a lot of these guys don't get complete rehab. So one of the reasons that we started timing everybody, aside from the fact that, you make an uglier face, is that the trainers would say, oh, he's 85%. Well, how do you know he's 85% if you don't know what 100% was? But now you can go in and you can tell an Adrian Beltre, hey, you ran that last one at 90% and you really didn't even push yourself. And he says, oh, well, maybe I can run harder. All right? Most occurred in May. Most of them occurred early in the season, which said we didn't run enough in spring training. Plus the weather's cold and we travel a lot. Most of them are not due to weak hamstrings. Most of them are not due to tight hamstrings. As soon as the guy gets a hamstring pain, the first thing they want to do is what? Hey, let's stretch out your hamstring and then let's put you on the leg curl machine. But that's not the cause. The causes are, one, bad mechanics. We overstride. We're jumping to first base. When we're accelerating, instead of recovering with our heel to our butt, up close, we're recovering like we're running 100 meters. We don't plantar flex we plantar flex instead of dorsiflex on the recovery. We don't accelerate, we don't decelerate, we don't change directions enough in practice. So we don't run bases, we don't run curves, or we run poorly. Our progression's too much, too soon, too often. Several years ago, my neighbor got my wife and his wife a t-shirt that said, "Two runner," T-O-O runner. Too early, too late, too tired, too busy, right? So these are two injuries. We work on the wrong exercises. We work on producing force instead of eccentrically reducing force. We train the hamstrings, all right, to flex the knee instead of to extend the hip and eccentrically flex the knee. And then we have reciprocal inhibition. You all know that when your biceps contracts, the triceps has to relax. If not, you end up this. And for those of you that are old enough to remember Charles Atlas, that's what Charles Atlas' whole deal was. Contract them both at the same time and send me money. Well, the hip flexors are the antagonists to the hip extensors. So if you've got tight hip flexors, your glutes aren't going to function. And so now you get synergistic dominance. Your hamstrings have to perform the function of the glutes, which they're not prepared to do. So here's what I always tell our players. Today I substitute Prince Fielder for Carlos Lee. But Carlos is the glutes and Altuve's your hamstring. And if you're asking Altuve to do the work of Carlos, you're flirting with hamstring injury. So how do we train in rehab? Well, we stretch our hip flexors, and you can do it a variety of ways. We turn on our glutes, and then we train our hamstrings to extend the hip and to eccentrically flex the knee. We have, throughout our society, upper cross syndrome and lower cross syndrome, which says we're going to have tight agonists and weak loose antagonists. Tight antagonists and weak loose agonists. So an upper cross syndrome, you see this in accountants. Oh, we don't see this in baseball players. Yeah, you do. You have round shoulders, tight T-span, disruption of scapular rhythm, lack of shoulder range of motion. Lower half, you got anterior pelvic tilt. Your pelvis goes down, so you go around looking for nickels, and you don't want to do that, so you get up, and now you get a lordotic spine. You inhibit your glutes. You increase your hamstring stress. Upper cross, we usually do too much pushing, not enough pulling. We tend to pull in one plane, sagittal plane, although we perform in multiple planes. And then the same thing we talk about, hip flexors, glutes, and a weak core. Well, this is the way students get it, right? You say, well, this upper cross syndrome, lower cross syndrome. Look at this skeleton. Okay? We're sitting in the classroom. We're sitting in the library. We're playing video games. We're studying. We're eating. We're traveling. We're in this position multiple hours a day. Well, look at a baseball player. They're in the ready position. They're doing infield drills. They're doing soft toss. They're doing batting practice. They're in the ready position for 9 innings. And when they're not in the ready position for 9 innings, they're sitting on the bench. They're sitting in the dugout. They're sitting in the bullpen. They're sitting on the bus. They're sitting in their locker. And what I found is that it takes a Major League Baseball player about 6 weeks to start developing upper cross and lower cross syndrome. So, our tests were, first we did the Thomas test for hip flexion. Then we did a straight leg raise. Then we isolated the lumbar region and had them roll over. Pitchers, man, they just roll over. Their thoracic spines are loose. Position players, So we tested for this every month, after every road trip. And we worked on increasing it every day in practice. So what did we do? We did hip flexors. We strengthened the core. We did our big 3 every day for our glutes and our shoulders. So, we did the band walks where most of you do. We did the tubing stress so we could go the other way. But we did internal rotation. We took that last picture. We took a band, put it around their knees, put another band around their ankles, and had them do internal rotation. And then we did a variety of pulls. We pulled in one plane. We pulled in multiple planes. We used compound movement. Now, second injury you hear a lot about in baseball is oblique injury. 80% occur on the non-dominant side. Again, most early in the season. Number 1 cause, previous injury. Why do they occur early in the season? I call it volume overload. Guy's taking 100 swings a day in spring training. Now the season starts and he gets off for an 0 for 12. Now he's what? He's hitting early. He's hitting his VP. A number of teams now are carrying batting practice pitchers to throw during the game. Because you go to some places that have cages that are by the visiting team dugout. So they're hitting between at bats. And then they hit again after the game. And all that is what? Volume overload. All right? So we look at hamstring. 50 injuries. Again, almost the same. 1,600 days. More on pitchers. A little slightly less. $22 million. You put those two together and it's $50 million. You see why baseball general managers and owners get upset when a guy goes on the DL? Keys, prevention, and complete rehab. In my opinion, and those of others, oblique injuries are deceleration injuries. When you rotate to hit, when you rotate to pitch, You stretch on the opposite side, and you pull on the other side. And the faster you swing, the harder you throw, the greater the eccentric force. So what causes them? I say volume overload. We looked at 20,000 swings, 20,000 throws. If you take an extra 100, 200, 3 days a week, you got a 35% increase in volume. If you go 6 times a week, you got a 70% increase in volume. And track coaches will tell you, hey, we don't want to get more than 20% increase in volume when we're running distance, right? And yet we're going to take these little tiny muscles and overload them that much. So volume creates fatigue. What's the causes? Some people say, not enough core. Other people say, yep, too much core. And then, damn, you're doing the wrong core. All right? So in prevention, we started a program in spring training. We counted every pitch every throw that players made. We counted every swing. We broke it down into days, throws and pitches per day, per week, and then we're in the process of developing a progressive program. So the guy doesn't go out, have a bad outing, and then go out and throw 100 pitches in a bullpen session to try to correct it. Right? We train the core in 3 planes: flexion, extension, rotation, anti-rotation, chops, and lifts. We start with core stability, anti-flexion, then we go to anti-rotation, and then we go to endurance, strength, and power. And as you can see down at the bottom is just an example of, how you could do it. Monday, you may be anti-flexion, Tuesday, anti-rotation, Wednesday, you go for strength, Friday, go for powers, and then Saturday might be a mix of the 3. But, how you do it is up to you. Remember, your body's a 3-link chain. You've got your legs, you've got your trunk, and you've got your arms and shoulders. The segments with the greatest amount of mass have the greatest potential for force production. So, if it takes 1,000 pounds of force to throw a baseball 90 miles per hour or to hit a ball 400 feet, you add your legs, plus your trunk, plus your shoulders, and you get 1,000 pounds of force. If you have a weak core, say it's only 200, you're not going to be able to transfer 100% of that 500 pounds. So let's say you can transfer 80%. So now you got 400 plus 200 plus 200 is 800. You're not going to get there, but you're going to usually injure your arm and shoulder by trying to make up for a weak core by throwing harder with your arms and shoulders. I've had players that say, well, you know what? I'm going to increase my leg strength by 20%. Okay. So now we get our leg strength up to 600, but we didn't do anything with our core. We transfer 80% of 600, 400, 200, 200, 880. Still didn't get there, did we? But we spent a lot of time. We really got our legs stronger, but we didn't do anything for our core. So lack of core stability creates energy leaks from your hips and legs, reduces your power, decreases your performance, increases your risk of injury. This is what I said before. We shouldn't run long distance. We're training the wrong energy system. We're training the wrong fiber types. And with long distance running, we're producing a catabolic hormone, cortisol, instead of anabolic hormones, testosterone. So we're doing everything that we could do wrong. All right? And that's why I said if you spend 80% of your time practicing jogging, you just spent 80% of your time practicing to be slow. Now, pitchers are notorious. They want to do a flush run afterwards. Hey, what did I say? Most activities are 5 seconds in baseball. So how are you going to develop lactic acid? There's nothing to flush out. And if you could flush it out, it would be gone before you started to flush it out. All right? So we're training the wrong energy systems. We're trying to get rid of something that doesn't exist. You'll find in professional baseball players, it doesn't make a difference what's the level, they can relate to 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 3, 5, 7, 9, 2 of these, 5 of these, 6 of these. Now, they can't even read the itinerary to find out, what time batting practice is. So we came up with a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 for our starting pitchers. So day 1, they do 2 hundreds. They do 4 75s. They do 6 50s. They do 8 25s and 10 10s. And then what happens the next day? We take away the 2s. They do 4, 6, 8, 10. I can remember that. And then what do? We take away the 4s. And then what do? They run nothing but 10s. Right? We're not working with rocket science. Bear Bryant said it best. There's no place on the scoreboard for IQ. I was telling Mike a story about a player that used to be with the Marlins. He was in spring training with us this year. And he had an off day when he was with the Marlins. And he took a friend out to dinner, and he took a doggy bag home. And about 10 o'clock at night, he got hungry. He put the doggy bag in his microwave, punched the buttons, and nothing happened. Opened the door, punched it again, nothing happened. 3 times. Turned to his friend, and he said, "Microwave's broke." He said, "No, it's a wall safe." All right? So, guys don't know the difference between a wall safe and a microwave. All right? So, relievers, we run shorter intervals. We run what we call cut 60s and cut 30s. So, a cut 30 or a cut 60, you run 30 yards down, plant, and come back hard 30. What are we doing? Accelerating, decelerating, change direction, re-accelerating. Okay? So we're training the right energy system, the right muscle groups, the right movement types. Position players, I've already told you what we do. Variety of starts, a lot of starts, stops, change directions, and we run short to long. We make sure that they can run 10 yards correctly before we ask them to run 20 yards incorrectly. We like to make it game-like. We like to add a ball. Anytime you can add a ball to an athlete, it's like playing with your dogs. Right? I mean, it's the greatest thing in the world. Athletes are competitive. The picture on the left is Nolan Ryan and Robin Ventura. Nolan said when Ventura came to the mound, the thing that went through his mind is it's only happened twice before. Willie Stargell and Dave Winfield, and they were both bigger than this guy. When Nolan retired, his teammates gave him matching Longhorn steers, 2,000 pounds each, and they named them Robin and Ventura. All right? On the other side, we've got Roger Clemens. Now, the first year Rocket was with the Astros, at spring training, his son was still in high school, so he had his private jet. He would fly home after practice and spring training on Friday, stay home, watch his son play Friday, his younger kid play Saturday, fly back Sunday morning in time for spring training. So he tells me after the first trip back to Houston, he gets up Saturday morning and he tells his 9-year-old, he says, "Hey, get up, you got a game today." His kid's playing Dad's pitch. And he said, "Dad, are you coming to the game?" He said, "Come to the game." He said, "I'm pitching." So we're in spring training and he's pitching to a bunch of 9-year-olds. And he said his brother told him, who's the coach of the team, said, "Hey, you have to watch him." He said, "He's a real hot dog." He said he hits his bat on the plate and flips it up. He said, "I didn't pay any attention, but his first at bat, I look over and he hit a triple and he's giving me one of these." So he said his second at bat, I knocked him down. And he said, "Dad, what are you doing?" I said, "Son, that's not the way you play the game." He said, "You know, when my wife was pregnant with the second child," he said, "I was pitching in a wives game in Boston before a game, and she had a line drive off my shin, and she laughed when she got to first base. So her next at bat, I hit her in the back with a curveball." I said, "All right, let me get this straight. You knock down a 9-year-old and you hit a pregnant woman, and you want Mike Piazza to believe you're just throwing the bat off the field?" I mean, these guys are competitive. So we do things, side to sides, which you've all done. We do, they all think they're wide receivers, so we do touchdown runs. We've got a little 2-minute football drill that they do. We got something that the players, they'll do 8 to 10 reps of something like maybe a prisoner squat and then stride 30 yards and then do 8 to 10 something else. And the players nicknamed them reindeer games. What the hell are the reindeer games today? So, we've got all of those kinds of things. And then we always finish with a finisher. So in conclusion, I'd like to recommend that you go, if you're not a member, you become a member. If you are a member, you get more involved. You don't know now what you're going to know 5 to 10 years from now. I've explained that to you. I didn't know any of this crap. So, excuse me. Right now, do the best with the knowledge that you have. Mike Boyle says it best. He says, "Hey, this is the truth as we know it now." All right? So don't be ashamed to say, "Hey, I made a mistake," later. Close the gap between what you know and what you don't know. Technology's exploding. Take advantage. Use all that stuff that's on your cell phones when you're not in here, when you're not in class. All right? Question what you read, question what you see, question what you hear. If it doesn't meet the NSCA guidelines, set it aside. You spend an hour a day working on your profession, at the end of the year, you'll be one of the most knowledgeable. 1965, I got a bachelor's degree, 2 majors, physical education and math. Fast forward, here we are 50 years later, College Station. I'm talking to you, and you're members of a profession that didn't exist. on behalf of an association that didn't exist. It's not going to take you 50 years the way the things are exploding. We had a pitcher my first year, Joaquin Andujar from the Dominican. Joaquin said there is one word in America that says it all. One word. You know what that one word is? You never know. All right? So start working, keep working, because you never know. All right? Thank you.